Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Eirini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum. Peace be unto you, and welcome back to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic channel. In this video, this is the summary video for the book of Judges. So all 21 chapters looking at the biggest differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. Beginning in chapter 1, in verse 18, this is talking about Judah did not inherit Gaza nor her coasts, nor Ascalon nor her coasts, nor Ekron, nor Ashdod, nor the lands around it. So we have here 4 areas, actually 4 and plus the other lands around it that were not inherited. Underline not. What does it say in the Masoretic? Judah took Gaza. So they're saying the Masoretic, no, they were inherited. They took them. They possessed them. All of these, Gaza, Ascalon, Ekron, and Ashdod was not included. So notice that. That is a big difference. So I'm going to include that. That's our opening scripture, our opening difference. And in verse 27, same chapter, talks about the Scythians, which are not often mentioned in the Tanakh. This is one of the first mentions that I remember seeing this name, the Scythians, and they are an ancient peoples. You can read all about them. Now we go to chapter 3 in verse 16. This is an interesting difference because depending on how long this weapon is, you have to use your common sense, people. So we see here a dagger. We read about a dagger that Ehud had used to assassinate this government official. I believe it was Eglon. And in the Septuagint, it is measured a span long, which is the width of an open palm of a hand. So whether that is the width of the hand or the length of the hand, is it horizontal or vertical? In either case, it's going to be between maybe 6 inches to 10 inches, depending on the size of the hand. But let's just say 8 inches, just for the sake of argument. That would be a dagger, technically. And because a dagger is easier to conceal, that would make sense. However, if the length of the blade was a cubit, as the Masoretic says, a cubit is the length from the bottom of the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. Okay, so that is something like a foot and a bit, maybe a foot and a half. So that would no longer be a dagger. That would be like a short sword, which would be, understandably, an obstacle to moving around and even concealing it if it were, in fact, a cubit long. So that's the weapon. Now, looking at 17, we have a massive difference because it describes Eglon as a very handsome man, not a fat man. So that's an interesting difference there. If I click here, let's just see how else that is translated. Could it be translated as handsome as well? All right, well, it seems to be fat, fatter, plenteous, and then rank. So there does not seem to be a connotation for that being handsome, but it says very handsome, not just regular handsome. We're talking like Brad Pitt handsome. He was, as they say, a stud, perhaps, or other complimentary terms. Verse 24, in the same chapter, it says, uncover his feet. In the Septuagint, versus he covers his feet. So the servants were assuming something was being done there, and that seems to be an idiom, possibly. could be a custom related to Ruth 3 verse 7, which is a book we're going into soon. So laying up the covering of his feet, as it is put in the book of Ruth. So this could have a perhaps intimate connotation. And then in verse 25, it talks about just building on this possible connotation. Till they were ashamed, his servants, they didn't barge in. They gave them their privacy. So this could be an old idiom as well, till they were ashamed, which could mean until a reasonable time in which they would be finished their perhaps intimate activity. Perhaps Eglon was of a different sort, his preference there. Okay, chapter 4. Okay, so this is chapter 4 now, and it talks about Yael, the wife of Eber. She is pretty much another assassination. She is assassinating Sisera, and it talks about how the order of things took place. It says that he fainted. She gave him the milk, and it says that he fainted away. Okay, why am I not finding this? He fainted away, and darkness fell upon him, and he died. So we can see in order. There it is in verse 21. He fainted away as a result of the milk. She took the pin of the tent, and she used that pin, the tent peg, to pretty much go through his head there to end him. And so the milk may have calmed him down, but it did not make him sleep, because he was still sort of, he had some consciousness, because it says he fainted away. Perhaps he was unconscious, I don't know, but it says he fainted away. Was he half asleep? Was he on the way to sleep? But in any case, he fainted away, whether it's talking about his consciousness or his soul, the soul of his, his life being a living soul fainting away. Could be either or, but it says, and darkness fell upon him, and he died. So it's like he blacked out. He was fainting away, and then darkness fell upon him, which seems to be blacking out, and he died due to the loss of blood. Darkness fell upon him, and he seems to be in shock, and then died. Perhaps that's what happened. And then in the Masoretic, he was fast asleep. So he was already sleeping as a result of the milk, and became weary, so became weak, and he died. Okay, moving on to chapter 5 now. Okay, so chapter 5, this one can be a little controversial. It seems to be that every time you talk about angels in the Bible, it can get some controversy here. But let's just read it for what it says. The stars from heaven set themselves in array. Okay, the stars from heaven, set themselves to fight with Sisera out of their paths. So what are the stars that come from heaven? Usually when there's a reference to stars, and especially if they're coming from heaven, that is referring to the angels. Angels are literally fighting with Sisera. We have a divine intervention happening. Versus they fought from heaven, so it's like the kings fought from heaven. And then the stars in their courses, whatever that means, fought against Sisera. So that could mean the constellations. It's hard to say because it says the stars in their courses. And then verse 22 to 23, which kind of confirms my suspicions that these were angels, because it says, his mighty ones, referring to Adonai's mighty ones, his angels, hasted. And then it says, to curse Meroz. So we see here, curse you it, said the angel of Adonai. So that's confirmation. It's not me making up something or just speculating. It's right there, ladies and gentlemen. The angel, the messenger of Adonai, cursed, says, cursed is everyone that dwells in it. So we can see that's confirmation. Verses in the Masoretic, it says, "They're mighty ones," talking about Sisera's men. So we can see that great difference there in terms of who are these people fighting. So then it says, "Help fight alongside Yah's angels," or Adonai's angels. Verses to help fight Sisera's men. I apologize for the beeping. It's kind of funny to see somebody dressed the way I am in an ancient kind of fashion. Then you've got that little Casio watch again beeping. Okay, so that's all for chapter 5. Judges chapter 6, verse 14. "Behold," this is Adonai, or I should say the messenger of Adonai, talking to Gideon, saying the following. "Go in this your strength, you shall save Israel out of the hand of Midian. Behold, I have sent you." What incredible words to hear coming from the messenger of Adonai. If that was me being spoken to, or perhaps yourself, what great confidence you would have in whatever venture you would have assigned to you, whatever your mission was. You know that you'll be successful because he says here, confirms to him, "I have sent you," not just anybody, Adonai himself, relaying that message to Gideon. Okay, so we can see the difference in terms of tone in the Masoretic. It's not a statement, it is a question. "Have not I sent you?" So we can see that Gideon's faith is kind of called into question here. It's questionable whether he was sent by Adonai, but we can see that, no, this is confirmation that not only was he sent by Hashem, by Adonai, but Gideon can trust in him as well. In verse 16, it says how the angel of Adonai said to him, "Adonai shall be with you." Verses, not the angel speaking, it's now Adonai himself. So why send the angel if you're going to talk to him directly? That doesn't make any sense. But in any case, this is what he says: "Surely I will be with you." I will be with you. So there's a bit of a, it's not 100% sure as to shall be with you versus surely I will be with you. But anyway, actually, you know what? It's pretty close in meaning. I'm not going to harp on that one. So disregard what that part. It's more, the focus is on the angel of Adonai versus Adonai himself speaking. It's not the statement that followed. Verse 17, we have a massive difference as well here. And it says here, "Gideon said to him," to Adonai, "If now I have found mercy in your eyes, and you will do this day, if you will do this today for me, all that you have spoken of with me," versus, "If now I have found grace in your sight, then show me a sign." So we can see that he's making a request of Adonai in the Septuagint versus he's asking for a sign, like a physical manifestation, a visible sign. And then verse 31, we have a massive difference again. Gideon speaking here. Gideon speaking to all the men who rose up against him. Versus Joash, his father, speaking for him. So I said in this video of chapter 6, Judges 6, that this supports the stance of those who say the Bible has been corrupted. And I might have been in error here, because the reason I say that is because I said that he called it. The verse 32 is the reason I say this. He called it in that day. So he was called it. The way I understand this now is that he was called it. He was named. Gideon was named. Not that the place was named Yerubal, he was named that. He was called it. But I initially understood it as uh, his father. Uh, Actually, no. In the Masoretic, it says his father called him that mockingly, perhaps to prove that he was wrong, since his father was actually a supporter, not just a supporter, but a worshiper of that false Elohim. So he was called it. It wasn't his father naming him that. Perhaps it was, but there's also a possibility it was the people calling him that as well, because it seemed to have been a public renaming of Gideon. Um, did he call himself that? That's another possibility as well. And then a big difference in the same verse, let Baal plead thereby, because his altar has been thrown down, versus let Baal plead against him. Okay, so maybe that wasn't such a big difference. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 8. So in Judges chapter 8, we see a reference, not even a reference, a mention of the ornaments that were around the necks of the Ishmaelites. And verse 26 confirms not only were they round, but even the specific shape of these ornaments were crescent shaped, so moon shaped, which is interesting because that symbol continues to be relevant today, ironically, maybe not ironically, to the descendants of the Ishmaelites who are largely of the faith of Islam or Islam. So that's chapter 8 for you. Moving on. Okay, so the reason I mentioned that crescent-shaped ornaments is because that it's true. It's a true fact that is a symbol today that endures, and it only proves the veracity, the truthfulness of the Tanakh and the Septuagint in particular. So chapter 9 of Judges, we see here in verse 30, I believe it's 30 or 29. Yeah, 29. It says here, I would say to him, multiply your host and come out. So he's talking about what he would do, because he isn't actually doing this. He's only proposing what I would do. In the Masoretic, it's not a proposal, it's not a plan. He's actually doing it, which doesn't make sense, because if you read the narrative, it just simply doesn't make sense. It's common sense, because how can he instantly speak with Abimelech unless he had a cell phone at that time? Okay, so that's chapter 9. Okay, so chapter 11, this one doesn't seem like a big difference, but if you're like a war historian, or if you're trying to make sense of the logistics of what's going on, is Israel passing by the land, near the land, or are they passing through the land? That is going to be a world of a difference depending on what is happening here. So the Septuagint is correctly describing their passage as by the land, or not passing through the land. That's a little invasive, to be honest. The Masoretic is saying, no, they want to pass through the land. Well, of course, who would let millions of people pass through your land? There's going to be consequences to that. However, passing by the land in a peaceful way is such a stark contrast. So that's all I'll say for that difference. Okay, this following one in chapter 12 is so important. I actually made multiple videos just on this one difference. And it is the matter of the word Shibboleth or Sibboleth. Now, it seems funny, but can you imagine today, okay, let's just say Mexico, the word Mexico. Do you not think it would catch on to people who want to preserve their lives that the correct way to say it would be Mexico? That's not hard to figure out. You just change one little pronunciation of an X into an H. So in this case of Shibboleth to Sibboleth, I don't think that's reasonable enough to say that they're not able to pronounce the H. H is an easy uh, syllable to pronounce. It's not a hard modification to make. And then we looked at the deeper meaning of the word when we reverse kind of engineered the original from Greek into Hebrew, which seems to be something people like to see in this channel. So that word Shibboleth, when you look at the original Greek, it's stakis or stakis, and it means a spike or ear of, again, not corn, but barley or wheat. And then when you go reverse translate that, reverse engineer it into Hebrew, it becomes aviv or abib. So that is a possibility. I'm going to say that's reasonable, because abib or aviv, that could. But then when we looked at the history of Hebrew and the language, the word abib itself was never pronounced aviv, not until recently, because that is the letter being used here. If you're spelling the word abib, it is aleph and then bet. It's not a wa or a vav. There was not even a vav back then. It only was not recent, but it was part of the evolution of the letters, how a waw became a vav. So it can't be that then. So we, by process of deduction, we deduced, or I deduced, that it was a spike or ear of wheat. And that word in Hebrew is melila. And again, this word can be pronounced in multiple ways and multiple with accents. And I'm going to just explain it briefly here. But melila, me Layla, me Lila, and then you have the matter of stressing the consonant, whether it's melila or melila or melila, or even the way you combine the consonants together, melila or melila, or just like speed reading, melila. It just really depends. And that's why I offer this. I submit this to you as this is the actual word that was being used. Okay. So that, I think that is all. And not only that, it is also subtle enough, this word, to be tricky, and people can still think that they're saying it right. Okay. So if I'm crossing the river and my life's at stake, if I get this wrong, I'm going to say it Malila. How would you say it? In a way that it's kind of ambiguous, but that is an ambiguous word in terms of how do you pronounce it at all. So next chapter. So I think it's really important I show you the actual scriptures. So I could just read it from my notepad here, but I'd rather you see with your own eyes what I'm talking about here, that I'm not just pulling a fast one on you. So this is Manoah's wife, the mother of Samson, conversing with, I believe it's an angel. Yeah, an angel. And this is what the angel says. You are with child. So there is a child in your womb. In black and white. You are with child. The Masoretic. You shall conceive. Conceive means, well, it says here hara. Can't really see what that is because my window's shrunk, but in the Webster's dictionary, to conceive means you shall conceive means the embryo being fertilized. So the embryo is not fertilized yet, technically, if she has not conceived. So that is a stark difference there. And if we look at pregnant, so you shall be pregnant. So she's not pregnant yet in the Masoretic. In the Septuagint, you're already pregnant, but you're going to, the child's there. It's just, I guess she didn't know about it. She didn't know that the child was already being formed, perhaps. Same chapter, a big difference in this chapter in verse 14 talks about the Nazarite vow. The Nazarite vow, and this gives us a little clarity if anyone wants to take the Nazarite vow. she, the mother, and I'm assuming the baby, once he comes out and grows up, shall eat of nothing that comes of the vine. Wait for it. Yielding wine. It's not just any vine, because people can say the following, that if you're on a Nazirite vow, based on the Masoretic anyway, you're you're forbidden, prohibited, it's taboo. Okay, maybe not taboo. It's not permissible for you to eat tomatoes, tomato products, tomato sauce, ketchup, peas, cucumbers, squash. That would include pickles, pumpkin pie, fruit such as kiwi, passion fruit, watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, other melons, because all of these vegetables and fruits grow on the vine. Technically, they do. However, how many of them produce wine? Is it not only grapes? And please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Can you make wine that can make you drunk from these other fruits and vegetables? So that's all for that chapter. Judges chapter 14, big difference in verse 4, talking about how Adonai sought to be revenged on the Philistines. Or, okay, you know what? I'm just seeing this in a different light right now. This could be Samson. This could be a reference to Samson seeking revenge on them. Because it says here the rationale, at that time, the Philistines lorded it over Israel. So Samson's like, I'm tired of this. I want to get revenge on them for what they're doing to me and my people and my parents. So perhaps it was talking about Samson. I'm going to be open to that possibility. In the Masoretic, it says he sought an occasion, whether it's Adonai or Samson. He sought an occasion, not revenge. What does occasion mean? Okay, let's look into that quickly. And after we look into that, we're going to get into the next difference about the lion. So a time of heat, an opportunity to fight. Okay, so not really revenge, just trouble. Just wants to start a scrap. Okay, big difference in verse 6, talking about the lion that he encountered, that roared upon seeing Samson in the line of sight once they met each other. And it says that he crushed him. Samson crushed the lion as he would have crushed a kid of the goats, versus ripping him, renting him, or ripping him in two. So I don't think there's any other possibility of this being not ripped in two, but let's just look for the sake of argument. It does say, yeah, cleave, tear in two. So there's no crushing there. Okay, and verse 8, talking about the honey that was found in the lion, it was in his mouth. In the mouth, not in the carcass, like in his underbelly or abdomen or some part of the lion that is not the head. It is specifically in the mouth, not just in the head, in his mouth. Chapter 15, this is talking about said to them. Okay, said to them versus concerning them. So this is Samson talking to them. I believe it's his friends, versus concerning them. So he spoke directly to his friends, but it makes more sense this is referring to his wife and father-in-law, since they were not close enough friends of the Philistines, as shown by their being burned alive, versus he spoke about them to others in the Masoretic. Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, pardon the interruption. So that was Judges. This is Judges 16 now. And this is talking about how Delilah was expressing her frustration with Samson, and this is how she expressed it. You have deceived me. You've lied to me. Stop lying to me. Versus you've mocked me. Oh, you're making fun of me. Stop teasing me. Oh, she is telling him explicitly, stop lying to me. Okay, and then in the same chapter, it talks about how the Philistines had captured him after they've gouged out his eyes, they shaved his head, and so on. But this is one that really resonates with me, really shook me. That not only did they bind him with fetters of brass, as it says in both translations, but they also did something that they also did to the Messiah, to Yeshua. It says here, they smote him with the palms of their hands. They struck him. They were punching him or slapping him, whatever it was, but they were striking him with their hands. They were physically assaulting him, okay? They were abusing him. So he was like a joker to them, like a clown, but they also physically abused him. They just mistreated him, besides gouging out his eyes and all that, just not treating him with any dignity at all. Okay, so they had omitted that in the Masoretic. I don't know why. That's a pretty big omission. And as well, there's a big difference in 28. This happens in two occasions where Samson is not just calling to Adonai. He's not just, hey Adonai, or oh Adonai, yeah, help me, remember me. He's weeping. He's showing his emotion. He's got a lot of, in his heart, he's just pouring out his soul before Adonai. Oh Adonai, my Adonai, remember me. He's really, pouring out his heart. He's emotional there. Verse 30 talks about his last statement before his final words. Was it, let me die with the Philistines? No, it was, let my wife perish with the Philistines. He realized how she betrayed him. And supposedly, I'm going to kind of speculate here. Perhaps he didn't really love his wife, or maybe he did, but then after she betrayed him, his heart turned against her, perhaps. Okay, so that's chapter 16. Okay, I'm just going to speak about the rationale of these videos, or this summary video anyway. These types of videos are to save you time rather than watching all 21 videos, which would probably take multiple hours. You can watch this one video, sums up the highlights anyway, the big differences, the biggest ones anyhow, in a matter of, less than an hour. I'm probably aiming for 30 minutes. I probably went over that by now, but we'll see by the time this recording is done. So chapter 17, talking about a man named Micah, and in verse 5, he turned his house, converted it to the house of Elohim. Versus he made a house of Elohim. So like a separate building versus converting his house into a place of worship. And in verse 15, this is an interesting, okay, there is no verse 15, so I suppose that's the next. I don't see where that is. Where do you come from? Okay, let me pause for a moment. Okay, so yeah, in chapter 18, verse 15, talks about how the Levite, 5 men went out to spy the land, and then they visited the house of the young man, the Levite, specifically into the house of Micah, and they asked him how he was. I've never read this before in the scriptures, someone asking how you are. That seems like such a modern vernacular to use. How are you? How are you faring? How are you faring well? How's your welfare? And the Masoretic talks about how they're simply saluting him. So recognition, polite recognition of his presence. Hello, hi, how are you doing? Actually, not even how are you doing. Hi versus how are you? How are you doing? Right? So that's interesting in terms of their etiquette. Okay, and We're going to look at 22, verse 22. Now this is a continuous difference throughout both Septuagint and Masoretic, and it's the matter of this word crying out or gathered together. So many Hebrew words are multidimensional. Even the word shalom, for example, or ahava, they can have many connotations, and it requires wisdom to discern which connotation to use in the right context. So whether it's cried out or gathered together, that depends on the context. And we can see that in verse 23. What is the matter with you that you have cried out? So that makes sense a little bit, but actually makes a little more sense that you have come with such a company. Because if you read the context and you just watch the video of chapter 18, you'll see what I'm talking about, why it makes more sense for it to be gathering. So it depends on the context and how it fits with the narrative, which one makes more sense. Okay, so that's chapter 18. This is now the story of the Levite and his concubine. And it describes how his concubine departed from him. So she just left him, took her leave of absence. But in the Masoretic, she didn't just take her leave, she played the W here. I'm not going to say the word. So she did this, Zana, versus just departing from him. So it's one thing to just leave your husband and going to the house of her father, to Bethlehem, Judah. So there's no, guilt being ascribed to her like she did something sinful, besides leaving her husband, which doesn't seem good. But in the Masoretic, it's really playing up her bad character and his poor choice of a wife. So I lean towards the Septuagint because that's what this channel is about, and because, again, of Mashiach, one of the first ones we looked at, Psalm 40, and anyway, if it's for verse 8, I believe, or verse 6, I believe it's verse 8, but in any case, let's continue looking at this. It says in verse 22, we did a video dedicated to this topic alone. The sons of transgressors is a better translation versus the sons of Belial. So these are not some kind of supernatural beings or demons or angels or sons of Satan or Satan himself. It's not related to that. It's sons of transgressors. And then I also pointed out how it is interesting that Benjamin was being given the victory in terms of what was going on as a result of the events that took place. But I did do a video just on that as well, talking about perhaps it was related to the Ark of the Covenant, but not just the physical aspect of bringing the Ark of the Covenant, not bringing that they brought it there, but they did their sacrifices. But what needs to precede sacrifices and offerings for them to be acceptable is a pure and clean heart, a contrite heart. Their attitude has to change. They have to repent of their sins and not just turn away from evil, but do rightly, do what is right in the eyes of Yah, not in their own eyes. So it seems that they took those steps to remedy what took place in the first 2 days of the battling, where they lost 2 times to Benjamin. They had their butt handed to them. And then day 3, after they had fasted, they seemed to have prayed. They did all the right things to remedy that. That only then, as a result, did Adonai tell them, "Now I will deliver Benjamin into your hands." Okay? So please watch the video on that if you want to get more in depth about that. So chapter 21, the final chapter, we're going to look at, there's no more chapters in this book. Verse 13. It says here that, verse 13, okay, I invited them to peace, to make peace. Okay, I don't see that there. Hold on, let me just pause it for a moment. Okay, so actual chapter 21 says how all the congregation sent and spoke to the children of Benjamin while they were in the rock Rimmon, and invited them to do what? To make peace. Invited them to peace. That was the purpose. Let's have shalom. Let's have peace. But what does it say in the Masoretic? They didn't invite them to peace. It just said that they sent to speak to them, to call peaceably to them. Okay, we're going to call you in a peaceful way. So that's like an adverb. This is linked to the verb call. So they're calling to them peaceably, not for the purpose of peace, but just calling to them. We don't know why. And then it says they were content, talking about the women, I believe. They were content because otherwise they would not have a husband. They would die single and childless. So let me just pause for a moment here. Okay, so once again, this is verse 14 now. So Benjamin returned to the children of Israel at that time, and the children of Israel gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the daughters of Jabesh or Yabesh Gilead, and they were content. So this could mean the ones of Benjamin, the men of Benjamin who received the wives, the daughters as wives. This could also mean the daughters themselves were now content. However, in the Masoretic, it's a little confusing because it says they, meaning the women, sufficed them not. And that's not really confusing if you're referring to the rest of the men that were not provided wives, because there was a total of, I believe, 600. And how many women did they get? I think it was 400. Yes, 400. And 200 were not spoken for. The men were not, they didn't have a helpmeet. They didn't have any companions there. So they had to do something on top of that, which is to make up for the lack of 200 women, 200 wives for these 200 single men now. Okay, so that's all the content in terms of the biggest differences for the book of Judges between the Septuagint and the Masoretic texts. So having said that, I hope this video was helpful to you. Saves you a lot of time and is more efficient than watching all 21 videos. I understand not everybody has the time to just go through all 21 of those videos, but if you do, there's definitely a reward for you in terms of covering everything, being more thorough. But these are the biggest differences, at least in my opinion. So once again, that's all for the book of Judges. Do tune in. We're going to start the book of, I believe it's Ruth. Yeah, the book of Ruth is next. We're going to look at that in the coming weeks ahead. And so thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha.